The Caltharian fleet hung in space like a constellation of death, their massive dreadnoughts casting shadows across the debris field that had once been humanity's outer defense line. Admiral Zextera stood on the bridge of the flagship Voidrender, his 6 arms crossed in satisfaction as he watched the tactical display show the complete destruction of the human fleet. "Pitiful," he growled, his mandibles clicking with amusement. The humans lasted barely 3 cycles. Their ships crumpled like paper before our plasma cannons. His tactical officer, a smaller Caltharian with nervous eye movements, approached cautiously. "Admiral, we've detected no survivors from the human vessels. The debris field shows complete molecular breakdown of their hull materials. However, our sensors are picking up some unusual energy readings from the inner system." Zextera's 4 eyes turned toward the officer with mild interest. "Unusual how?" "The readings suggest the humans may have additional installations deeper in their system, but the signatures are strange. They don't match any known human technology we've encountered." The Admiral waved a dismissive hand. "Irrelevant. We've destroyed their primary fleet. Whatever pitiful defense platforms they have left will fall just as easily. Signal the fleet to advance toward their homeworld. We'll finish this quickly and add another species to our empire." Far below on the surface of Earth, in a bunker buried 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains, Fleet Admiral Sarachun stood before a massive holographic display showing the destruction of humanity's decoy fleet. The images were devastating. Ships exploding in brilliant flashes, escape pods being picked off by enemy fighters, brave men and women dying to sell the deception. Phase 1 complete, she announced to the war room filled with officers from every branch of Earth's military. The Caltharians believe they've won. All ships in the outer defense line have been confirmed destroyed. Casualties are within acceptable parameters for the operation. General Martinez, head of Earth's Special Operations Command, stepped forward. His weathered face showed the strain of the past months of preparation. "Admiral, are you certain about this plan? We just watched them destroy 150 ships. Good ships, with good people aboard." Chen's expression remained steady, though those who knew her well could see the weight of command in her eyes. "General, those ships were already considered lost the moment we detected the Caltharian fleet entering our system. Every person who volunteered for the outer defense knew they were buying time for the real plan to work." The holographic display shifted, showing the approaching enemy fleet. Over 2,000 Caltharian vessels, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift destroyers, all advancing confidently toward Earth. Their formation was loose, almost casual, the formation of a fleet that believed it had already won. "They think we're beaten," continued Chun. "They think humanity is just another weak species to be conquered and enslaved. They've studied our technology, analyzed our tactics, and concluded that we pose no real threat. That assumption is about to cost them everything." Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez, head of the Prometheus project, activated a new section of the display. What appeared were technical readouts that would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. Energy output readings that defied conventional physics. Weapon specifications that belonged in science fiction. Ship designs that looked more like something from humanity's imagination than actual military hardware. "The Caltharians have been monitoring our communications for months," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They know about our conventional technology, our traditional weapons systems, our standard military doctrine. What they don't know about is what we've been building in the deep asteroid mining facilities beyond Neptune." The display zoomed out to show the outer solar system. Hundreds of small dots appeared, scattered throughout the asteroid belt and beyond. Each dot represented something that shouldn't exist. Ships built with technology that humanity had reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels over the past century, combined with breakthrough discoveries that had only become possible in the last decade. "Project Prometheus has been our most classified program," Chen explained. "While we maintained our public fleet using conventional technology, our best scientists and engineers have been working on something entirely different. Ships powered by zero-point energy extractors. Weapons that manipulate matter at the quantum level. Defensive systems that the Caltharians can't even detect, let alone understand." Captain James Morrison, recently returned from a deep space reconnaissance mission, pulled up detailed scans of the Caltharian fleet. "I spent 6 months observing their forces from a stealth scout. Their technology is impressive, but it's conventional. Plasma weapons, fusion reactors, titanium steel composite armor. They're advanced, but they're still thinking in terms of traditional warfare. And that's exactly what we're counting on, Chen replied. They expect us to fight them ship to ship, weapon to weapon, using tactics they understand. Instead, we're going to show them what happens when humanity stops playing by the rules they think govern warfare. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For months, they had all known this day was coming. The Caltharian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, conquering species after species with overwhelming force and superior technology. When their scouts had discovered Earth, the outcome seemed inevitable. What the Caltharians didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than they realized. The scattered alien artifacts found on Earth over the past century hadn't been accidents or coincidences. They had been carefully placed clues, left behind by a previous species that had faced the Caltharian Empire and lost. But, unlike those who came before, humanity had learned from their predecessors' mistakes. The Caltharians are used to fighting conventional wars against conventional enemies, Dr. Vasquez continued. They overwhelm with superior numbers and firepower, then move on to the next target. They've never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything in the opening moves just to deceive them about their true capabilities. General Martinez studied the tactical display with growing understanding. You're telling me that everything they think they know about human military capability is wrong? Not just wrong, Chen replied with a cold smile. Deliberately misleading. Every ship they destroyed in the outer defense line was using technology we deliberately kept at early 21st century levels. Every tactic we employed was something we knew they would expect. Every defensive measure we used was something they could easily counter. We've spent 5 years building a false profile of human military capability, added Colonel Rebecca Torres from intelligence. Every communication they intercepted, every piece of technology they observed, every tactical decision they witnessed was designed to convince them that humanity poses no real threat to their empire. The holographic display shifted again, showing detailed schematics of the hidden fleet. Ships that seemed to bend light around themselves, weapons that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level, defensive systems that existed partially outside normal space-time. It was technology that would have seemed magical to previous generations of humans. The first rule of warfare, Chen announced to the assembled officers, is to never let your enemy know your true strength until it's too late for them to adapt. The Caltharians believe they're facing a species with primitive fusion weapons and conventional armor. They have no idea they're about to encounter technology that operates on principles their science doesn't even recognize. Lieutenant Commander Park from the Communications Division raised a concern. Admiral, what if they detect our hidden fleet before we're ready to engage? Our quantum stealth systems are theoretical at best. They won't detect us because they're not looking for us, Dr. Vasquez assured him. Their sensors are calibrated to detect conventional matter and energy signatures. Our ships exist in a quantum state that their technology literally cannot perceive. To their instruments, empty space, and our stealth ships look identical. The massive display showed the Caltharian fleet's steady approach toward Earth. They were taking their time, confident in their victory, already making plans for the occupation and exploitation of humanity's homeworld. Their communications, easily intercepted and decoded, spoke of dividing Earth's resources among the various Caltharian noble houses. They're treating this like a victory parade, observed Commander Hayes from Naval Intelligence. Their fleet formation is ceremonial rather than tactical. They're not even maintaining proper defensive screens. Chen nodded with grim satisfaction. Perfect. Arrogance has always been the Caltharian Empire's greatest weakness. They've conquered so many species so easily that they've forgotten what it means to face a real enemy. The display zoomed in on Earth itself, showing the hidden defensive installations that honeycombed the planet's crust. Weapons platforms that could fire through dimensional space, shield generators that could protect entire continents, manufacturing facilities that could produce new ships faster than the enemy could destroy them. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Chen announced, the Caltharians believe they've just won a war. In reality, they've just walked into the most sophisticated trap in military history. When they discover what humanity is really capable of, it will be far too late for them to retreat or adapt their strategy. Dr. Vasquez activated a final section of the display, showing energy readings from across the solar system. Hundreds of hidden installations were coming online, their power signatures carefully masked but growing stronger by the minute. The true human defense fleet was awakening from its long concealment. The aliens made one crucial mistake, Chen continued. They assumed that because they could easily destroy our visible forces, they had seen everything humanity had to offer. They never considered that what they could see might be deliberately designed to mislead them. General Martinez looked at the display with new appreciation. How long before our hidden fleet is fully operational? 18 hours, replied Dr. Vasquez. By the time the Caltharians reach Earth's orbit, every ship in our Phantom fleet will be ready for combat. They'll find themselves facing not the broken remnants of a defeated species, but the full military might of a civilization that has spent decades preparing for this exact moment. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as the officers absorbed the magnitude of the operation. Everything they had believed about humanity's chances in this war had been a carefully constructed deception. The real war was about to begin, and the Caltharians had no idea what was waiting for them. Admiral Chen called for silence. Remember, from this moment forward, every decision we make will determine not just the fate of Earth, but the future of human expansion into the galaxy. The Caltharians have given us an opportunity to demonstrate that humanity is not just another species to be conquered and enslaved. The tactical display showed the enemy fleet continuing its confident advance, their ships spread out in a loose formation that prioritized intimidation over defense. They had no idea that hidden sensors were tracking their every movement, that quantum computers were calculating precise firing solutions, that the space around them was slowly filling with weapons they couldn't detect. Phase 2 begins in 6 hours, Chen announced. All department heads report to your stations. All hidden installations maintain stealth protocols until further orders. And remember, the enemy believes this war is already over. Let's make sure they're right, just not in the way they expect. As the officers filed out of the war room, the holographic display continued to show the Caltharian fleet's steady approach. They moved through space with the confidence of conquerors, their communications filled with discussions of how to best exploit Earth's resources and subjugate its population. They had no idea that they were flying into the most sophisticated ambush in the history of interstellar warfare. They believed the battle had ended with their easy victory over humanity's outer defenses. In reality, the real battle hadn't even begun. Admiral Chen remained in the war room long after the others had left, studying the tactical display and running through the final preparations in her mind. Somewhere out in the darkness between stars, the true human defense fleet waited in perfect concealment, ready to show the galaxy what humanity was really capable of when pushed to the brink of extinction. The Caltharians had made the fatal mistake of underestimating their enemy. Soon, they would learn that humanity had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone suspected, and that the species they thought they had defeated was about to teach them the true meaning of human determination and ingenuity. The deception was almost complete. The trap was nearly ready, and the enemy was walking right into it with absolute confidence in their superiority. The real war was about to begin. 18 hours had passed since the destruction of humanity's outer defense fleet, and Admiral Zexthera was beginning to grow impatient. The Caltharian fleet had slowed to a ceremonial crawl as they approached Earth's orbital space, savoring their inevitable victory. The Admiral stood before the massive viewing port of his flagship, watching the small blue world grow larger as they drew near. A pleasant little planet, he mused to his aide, a younger Caltharian named Vectar who had been assigned to learn from the Admiral's expertise. The humans chose their homeworld well. It will make an excellent agricultural center for the Empire once we've relocated the surviving population to the work camps. Vectar consulted his data tablet, reviewing the intelligence they had gathered about Earth. According to our analysis, Admiral, the planet has abundant natural resources and a large population of potential workers. The humans should provide decades of useful service before we need to consider replacement. Zextheron nodded approvingly. This was how the Caltharian Empire had operated for 1,000 years, overwhelming conquest followed by efficient exploitation. It was a system that had worked perfectly on hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems. There was no reason to expect Earth would be any different. "What's the status of their remaining defenses?" the Admiral asked, though he expected no surprises. "Minimal, sir. Our sensors detect a handful of orbital platforms around their homeworld, but they appear to be using the same primitive technology as their destroyed fleet. Fusion-based weapons, conventional armor, basic propulsion systems. Nothing that should trouble our shields." The Admiral's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Excellent. Signal the fleet to maintain current formation. We'll demonstrate the power of the Caltharian Empire before we begin the occupation. Let the humans see the full might of our forces before they surrender." What Zexthara couldn't see, and what his sensors couldn't detect, was the true defensive network that surrounded Earth. Hidden in quantum states that existed parallel to normal space-time, the real human defense fleet waited in perfect concealment. Thousands of ships built with technology that pushed the boundaries of physics itself, armed with weapons that could manipulate matter at the fundamental level. On the bridge of the stealth dreadnought Prometheus, Captain Elena Rodriguez watched the Caltharian fleet approach through sensors that operated on principles the enemy couldn't even comprehend. Her ship existed in a quantum superposition, simultaneously present and absent from normal space until the moment she chose to reveal herself. "Enemy fleet continues to advance in ceremonial formation," reported her tactical officer, Commander Liu. "They're maintaining minimum defensive screens, and their weapons aren't even powered up. They're completely confident in their victory." Captain Rodriguez studied the tactical display with cold professional interest. The Caltharian fleet was massive and impressive, but they were flying in a formation designed for intimidation rather than combat effectiveness. Their ships were spread out in a wide arc, presenting maximum visual impact while leaving themselves vulnerable to coordinated attack. "Perfect," she murmured. "Signal the fleet. All ships maintain quantum stealth protocols. Weapons to standby, but do not charge the main batteries until we receive the final attack order. We get one chance to do this right." Throughout the solar system, similar conversations were taking place on hundreds of hidden ships. The human defense fleet had been designed and built specifically for this moment, the first and possibly last battle that would determine humanity's fate in the galaxy. Every captain, every crew member, every system had been optimized for the single goal of proving that Earth was not just another world to be conquered. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the command center buried deep beneath the planet's surface, watching as the final pieces of humanity's trap fell into place. The holographic display showed both fleets, the visible Caltharian force advancing confidently, and the hidden human ships moving into perfect attack positions. "All stations report ready," announced Dr. Vasquez from her position at the scientific monitoring station. "Quantum stealth systems are holding steady. The enemy shows no indication they're aware of our true fleet. Orbital defense platforms are online but maintaining passive signatures," added General Martinez. "Ground-based installations are powered up and targeting solutions are locked. We're ready to begin Phase 2 on your command, Admiral." Chen nodded, studying the enemy formation one more time. The Caltharians had made every mistake she had hoped they would make. They were overconfident, spread out, and completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. More importantly, they were now too close to Earth to retreat before discovering their mistake. "Open a channel to all ships and installations," Chen ordered. "This is Admiral Chen to all defense fleet units. We've waited 5 years for this moment. Everything we've built, everything we've sacrificed, has led to the next few hours. The enemy believes they've already won this war. We're about to prove them very wrong." The communication channel crackled with quiet acknowledgments from across the fleet. Hundreds of captains and thousands of crew members who had trained for this moment, knowing they might never see their families again, but understanding that the future of human civilization depended on their actions. "Remember," Chun continued, "the Caltharians have never faced technology like ours. They don't understand quantum warfare, dimensional weapons, or zero-point energy systems. Use that advantage. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't give them time to adapt." On the Caltharian flagship, Admiral Zexthara was reviewing the final occupation plans when his sensors officer called out in alarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy spikes throughout the system. The readings are unlike anything in our databases." Zexthara moved quickly to the sensor station, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the impossible data. "What am I looking at, Officer Krenek?" "I'm not certain, sir. The energy signatures are appearing everywhere, around our fleet, near the planet, throughout the inner system. But our visual sensors show nothing. It's as if the energy is coming from empty space." A chill ran down the Admiral's spine as he realized what might be happening. In all their intelligence gathering, in all their observations of human technology, they had never encountered anything like this. Could their ships be using some kind of advanced stealth technology? "Unknown, sir. Our sensors aren't designed to detect quantum state matter. If they've somehow learned to phase their ships partially out of normal space-time." The Admiral's blood turned cold as the implications hit him. If the humans had technology that could hide entire fleets from Caltharian sensors, then everything they thought they knew about this species was wrong. Dangerously wrong. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, his voice tight with growing concern. "All ships to battle stations immediately. Raise full defensive screens and charge all weapons." We may have walked into a trap. But even as the orders went out, Zexthara knew they might already be too late. The Caltharian fleet was spread across millions of cubic kilometers of space in a formation designed for show rather than defense. If there really were enemy ships hidden around them, his fleet was in the worst possible position to respond. The answer came 60 seconds later when space around the Caltharian fleet suddenly filled with ships that hadn't been there moments before. Not just a few hidden vessels, but hundreds of them. Ships that seemed to materialize out of nothing, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that bent light around them like liquid mercury. "Impossible," breathed Zexthara as his sensors finally began to register the enemy fleet. The human ships were unlike anything in the Caltharian databases. Their energy signatures were off the scale, their weapons charged with power levels that defied conventional physics. "Admiral," called out his weapons officer, "the human vessels are powering up weapons systems that register beyond our measurement capabilities. I've never seen energy readings like these." On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Rodriguez smiled coldly as her ship fully materialized in normal space-time, her weapons locked onto the Caltharian flagship. "All ships, this is Rodriguez. Weapons free. Show them what humanity is really capable of." The first volley from the human fleet was unlike anything the Caltharians had ever experienced. Instead of conventional plasma bolts or kinetic projectiles, the human weapons fired focused streams of quantum energy that passed right through conventional shields as if they weren't there. Matter disruptor beams that unraveled molecular bonds at the subatomic level. Gravitational pulse weapons that crushed enemy ships by manipulating local space-time. 3 Caltharian destroyers simply ceased to exist in the first exchange, their matter converted directly to energy by weapons that operated on principles their science couldn't explain. A heavy cruiser found its hull aging decades and seconds as temporal manipulation weapons accelerated its atomic decay. An entire squadron of fighters was caught in a localized gravity well that compressed them into a sphere of ultradense matter. "Impossible," roared Admiral Zexthara as he watched a quarter of his fleet disappear in the opening minutes of the engagement. "No species has technology like this. How are they doing this?" His tactical officer was frantically working his controls, trying to find some way to target enemies that seemed to phase in and out of normal space at will. "Admiral, their ships are operating in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons can't lock onto targets that don't exist in conventional space-time." The human fleet moved through the Caltharian formation like ghosts, appearing long enough to deliver devastating attacks before disappearing back into quantum stealth. Their ships could materialize inside the enemy defensive perimeter, fire their impossible weapons, and vanish before the Caltharians could even return fire. On Earth, Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The months of careful deception were paying off exactly as planned. The Caltharians had come expecting to fight a conventional war against primitive technology. Instead, they were facing weapons and tactics that their empire had never encountered in 1,000 years of conquest. "Phase 2 is proceeding perfectly," reported Dr. Vasquez. The enemy fleet is taking massive casualties, and they can't even target our ships effectively. Their conventional weapons are useless against quantum state matter. Signal the orbital platforms, Chen ordered. Begin Phase 3. It's time to show them what Earth's real defenses look like. Hidden installations throughout Earth's orbital space suddenly revealed themselves, but these weren't the primitive platforms the Caltharians had detected earlier. Massive structures began to unfold from quantum storage, revealing defensive systems that dwarfed anything the enemy had imagined possible. Planet-based weapons that could fire through dimensional space, striking targets anywhere in the solar system instantly. Shield generators that wrapped Earth in protective fields operating on 11 different dimensional frequencies. Manufacturing platforms that began producing new ships in real time, replacing any losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. Admiral Zexthara watched in horror as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Caltharian Empire, was systematically dismantled by technology that seemed like magic. Ships that had conquered countless worlds were being destroyed by weapons they couldn't even detect, let alone defend against. Admiral, his communications officer called out desperately. The other fleet commanders are requesting permission to retreat. We've lost over half our forces in the first hour of engagement, and we haven't managed to destroy a single enemy vessel. The admiral stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet markers disappear one by one as the human ships continued their deadly dance through his formations. The creatures he had dismissed as primitive animals were proving to be the most dangerous enemy the Caltharian Empire had ever faced. Signal the fleet, he said finally, his voice heavy with defeat. All ships attempt to withdraw to minimum safe distance. We need to regroup, and his order was cut off as a massive human dreadnought materialized directly in front of his flagship, close enough that he could see details on its hull through the viewing port. The alien ship was beautiful in its deadly elegance, its surface rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. A communication channel opened without any input from the Caltharian crew, and Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge of the enemy flagship. Admiral Zexthara, I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force. Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. I'm offering you one chance to surrender. Zexthara's mandibles clicked nervously as he stared at the impossible ship hanging in space before him. How are you doing this? How does a primitive species have technology that our empire has never seen? Chen's voice carried a cold satisfaction that made the admiral's skin crawl. You made the mistake of assuming that what you could see was all we had to offer. You studied our technology, analyzed our tactics, and concluded that humanity posed no threat to your empire. That was a fatal error in judgment. The admiral looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in his officers' eyes as they realized the true scope of their mistake. They hadn't conquered a weak species. They had walked into a trap set by predators more dangerous than anything the Caltharian Empire had ever encountered. What do you want? Zexthara asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Surrender, Chen replied simply. Your fleet, your empire, everything. Humanity is no longer content to hide in one small corner of the galaxy, while species like yours prey on the innocent. It's time for a change in management. The admiral stared at the human ship, knowing that resistance was futile but unwilling to accept the destruction of everything his people had built. The Caltharian Empire had ruled this section of the galaxy for 1,000 years. How could it all end in a single battle against a species they had never considered a real threat? The answer hung in the space around his dying fleet, as human ships continued to demonstrate technology that redefined what was possible in warfare. The battle they thought they had won before it started was revealing itself to be humanity's coming-out party on the galactic stage. And the party was just getting started. Admiral Zexthara stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the impossible human dreadnought that hovered mere kilometers away. Around him, his officers worked frantically at their stations, trying to find some way to counter technology that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. Admiral, his weapons officer reported with barely controlled panic. Our plasma cannons have no effect on their hulls. The energy just disappears when it contacts their ships. It's like they're absorbing our attacks and converting them to something else. Their shields aren't deflecting our weapons, added the tactical officer. The energy is being absorbed at the quantum level and channeled into their own power systems. They're literally feeding off our attacks. Zextara felt his world crumbling around him as he processed this information. In 1,000 years of galactic conquest, the Caltharian Empire had never encountered anything like this. Their weapons, their tactics, their entire understanding of warfare was being rendered obsolete by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Rodriguez monitored the one-sided battle with professional satisfaction. Her ship's quantum absorption matrix was indeed converting the enemy's plasma fire into usable energy, feeding it back into her weapons systems, and making them even more powerful. Enemy fleet commander is attempting to establish a general retreat, reported Commander Liu from the tactical station. However, our interdiction field is preventing them from jumping to hyperspace. They're trapped in the engagement zone. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. The dimensional anchor network that surrounded the battle zone was another piece of technology the Caltharians couldn't understand or counter. It created localized distortions in space-time that made faster-than-light travel impossible within a radius of several million kilometers. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Begin the demonstration phase. Show them what our weapons can really do. Throughout the battle zone, human ships began to reveal capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what the Caltharians believed possible. Ships that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, firing from positions that constantly shifted through dimensional space. Weapons that could target enemy vessels through parallel dimensions, bypassing conventional defenses entirely. The heavy cruiser Newton's Revenge demonstrated its matter compiler by literally rebuilding itself while under fire, its hull regenerating faster than the enemy could damage it. The destroyer Quantum Storm showed off its temporal displacement cannons, aging enemy ships centuries and seconds until their hulls crumbled to dust. Most terrifying of all was the flagship Humanity's Answer, a massive dreadnought that seemed to bend reality around itself. Its primary weapon was a controlled singularity that could selectively target enemy vessels while leaving friendly ships completely untouched. Caltharian commanders watched in horror as their most powerful battleships were simply erased from existence, consumed by miniature black holes that appeared inside their hulls. "This is impossible," Zextara whispered as he watched another squadron of his ships disappear into nothingness. "No species develops this level of technology in isolation. Where did they get these capabilities?" Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the communication system again, as if she had heard his question. "You want to know how we developed this technology, Admiral? Let me tell you a story about the previous species that faced your empire in this region of space." The holographic display on the Caltharian flagship suddenly activated without any input from the crew, showing images that made Zextara's blood run cold. Ancient ruins on distant worlds. Archaeological sites that had been carefully hidden from Caltharian surveys. Technology that predated their empire by thousands of years. The Vorthak civilization, Chen's voice continued. They controlled this entire sector before your ancestors learned to walk upright. When the Caltharian Empire reached their space 800 years ago, the Vorthak tried to fight using conventional methods. They lost, just like every other species you've encountered. The display showed battle recordings that the Caltharians had never seen, massive space battles between their predecessors and an advanced alien species. The Vorthak had possessed technology superior to anything the Caltharians had at the time, but they had fought a traditional war using conventional tactics. But the Vorthak did something your other victims never managed, Chen continued. Before they died, they hid their technology, scattered it across hundreds of worlds in carefully concealed caches. They knew that someday, someone would find those caches and use them to finally stop your empire's expansion. Zextara felt his heart skip a beat as the implications hit him. "You're saying the humans found Vorthak technology?" "We found much more than that," Chen replied coldly. "We found their complete scientific database, their weapons technology, their manufacturing techniques. Most importantly, we found their analysis of Caltharian weaknesses and their plans for defeating your empire." The holographic display shifted to show human archaeological teams working at ancient Vorthak sites, carefully extracting technology that had been hidden for centuries. Scientists studying alien databases. Engineers reverse engineering weapons that operated on principles beyond conventional physics. The Vorthaks spent their final years preparing for this day, Chin explained. They knew they couldn't save themselves, but they could ensure that their successors would be ready when the Caltharians came. Every piece of technology you're seeing, every weapon that's destroying your fleet, was designed specifically to counter your empire's methods. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood before her command staff, watching as the psychological warfare component of their plan took effect. The destruction of the Caltharian fleet was only part of the objective. They needed to break the enemy's will to continue fighting, to make them understand that their empire's reign of terror was coming to an end. Status report on the enemy fleet, she ordered. Caltharian forces are down to 30% of original strength, reported Dr. Vasquez. Their remaining ships are clustered in defensive formations, but they're unable to target our vessels effectively. Enemy morale appears to be collapsing. General Martinez stepped forward with additional intelligence. Admiral, our intercepts indicate that other Caltharian fleets throughout their empire are receiving reports of this battle. Word is spreading that their supposedly invincible military has met its match. This was exactly what Chun had hoped for. The Battle of Earth wasn't just about defending humanity's homeworld. It was about sending a message to every corner of the Caltharian Empire that their reign of conquest was over. Every species they had enslaved, every world they had conquered, needed to know that the Caltharians could be beaten. Open channels to all previously conquered worlds in this sector, Chen ordered. It's time to let our new allies know that the liberation has begun. Across dozens of star systems, receivers on conquered worlds crackled to life with transmissions that their Caltharian overlords couldn't block or decode. The quantum communication network that humanity had inherited from the Vorthak operated on principles that Caltharian technology couldn't interfere with. On the slave world of Kepler 442b, the underground resistance movement led by Commander Thal of the Zelani species received the transmission with amazement. Images of Caltharian ships being destroyed by human weapons. Proof that the empire that had seemed invincible for centuries was finally meeting its match. "Is this real?" asked Thal's second-in-command, hardly daring to believe what they were seeing. "The quantum signature is authentic," confirmed their communications specialist. "These transmissions are coming from the direction of the Sol system. The humans are not only fighting the Caltharians, they're winning." Similar scenes played out across the empire as enslaved species received word that liberation was finally at hand. The Draconi rebels on Proxima 7 began emerging from their hidden bases. The Aquatic Confederation on the water world of Poseidon's Gate started coordinating uprising plans. The silicon-based crystalline collective on the mineral worlds of the asteroid belt began organizing their own resistance movements. Back at the battle zone around Earth, Admiral Zexthara watched his empire's grip on power beginning to crumble in real time. His communications officer was receiving reports from across Caltharian space. Uprisings on slave worlds, attacks on occupation forces, the collapse of carefully maintained control systems. "Admiral," the communications officer reported with growing desperation, "we're receiving distress calls from 17 different star systems. The occupied populations are revolting. They somehow believe that we're being defeated here at Earth." "That's because we are being defeated," Zexthara replied bitterly. "Signal the remaining fleet. All ships prepare for final engagement. If we're going to die here, we'll at least take some of these humans with us." But even as he gave the order, the Admiral knew it was futile. His weapons couldn't penetrate human defenses. His ships couldn't escape the dimensional anchor field. His empire was watching its supposedly invincible military being systematically destroyed by a species they had never considered a real threat. Captain Rodriguez received the order from Earth Command at that moment. "All ships, begin final demonstration. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity's future." The human fleet suddenly changed tactics, abandoning the careful, measured destruction they had been employing. Now they unleashed the full fury of their Vorthak-enhanced technology. Ships that could manipulate gravity began creating localized space-time distortions that crushed enemy vessels like tin cans. Weapons that operated in higher dimensions started tearing holes in reality itself, banishing enemy ships to parallel universes where the laws of physics were actively hostile to matter. The destroyer Hawking's paradox demonstrated its probability manipulation matrix by causing a Caltharian dreadnought to spontaneously exist and not exist simultaneously, creating a quantum paradox that tore the ship apart at the molecular level. The cruiser Einstein's Dream used its temporal acceleration cannon to age an entire enemy squadron into cosmic dust in the span of seconds. Most terrifying of all was when the human fleet began demonstrating their construction capabilities in real time, manufacturing ships that could convert raw matter into new vessels faster than the Caltharians could destroy them. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were showing that they could win any battle, anywhere, against any odds. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out in terror. "They're building new ships faster than we can engage them. Their manufacturing rate exceeds our destruction capacity by a factor of 10. Zextharos stared at the tactical display in numb shock as he watched humanity's industrial might unfold before him. They weren't just technologically superior. They had manufacturing capabilities that could outproduce the entire Caltharian Empire. Even if somehow his fleet managed to destroy every human ship in the battle zone, there would be 10 more waiting to take their place. "Open a channel to the human commander," he said finally, his voice hollow with defeat. I wish to discuss terms." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main screen, her expression cold and implacable. Behind her, Zexthara could see human officers working at stations filled with technology that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral Zexthara," Chen said formally, "are you ready to surrender your fleet?" "What happens to my people?" Zexthara asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens to the Caltharian Empire?" Chen's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Your empire's days of conquest and enslavement are over. Your people will be relocated to designated worlds where they can live peacefully without threatening other species. The worlds you've conquered will be liberated and given the chance to govern themselves. And if we refuse?" Chen's image was replaced by tactical displays showing the true scope of humanity's hidden fleet. Thousands of ships throughout the solar system. Manufacturing facilities that could produce entire armadas. Weapons platforms that could strike anywhere in the galaxy instantly. "Refusal is not an option," Chen's voice continued from the speakers. "Your choice is between surrender and extinction. Choose wisely." Zexthara looked around his bridge at his remaining officers, seeing the same defeat in their eyes that he felt in his hearts. The Caltharian Empire's 1,000-year reign was ending not with a glorious last stand, but with the complete technological obsolescence of everything they had thought made them superior. "I surrender," he said finally, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. The Caltharian fleet surrenders to humanity. On Earth, Admiral Chun allowed herself a small smile as she watched the enemy fleet power down their weapons and lower their shields. The first phase of humanity's expansion into the galaxy was complete. The Caltharian Empire that had terrorized this sector of space for 1,000 years was finished. But this was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, other empires were watching. Other species were learning that humanity had arrived on the galactic stage with technology that made their ancient advantages obsolete. The real test would come when those other powers decided whether to welcome humanity as an ally or attempt to destroy them as a threat. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The age of human expansion had begun, and nothing would ever stop it now. 6 months after the surrender of the Caltharian fleet at Earth, the galaxy had become a very different place. News of humanity's impossible victory had spread across every inhabited star system, carried by quantum communication networks that the major powers couldn't intercept or block. Species that had lived in fear for centuries were rising up against their oppressors, while the galactic superpowers frantically tried to understand how a previously unknown species had developed technology that made their own military forces obsolete. In the grand chambers of the Hegemony High Council on Arcturus Prime, 12 of the galaxy's most powerful beings gathered for an emergency session. The Hegemony had ruled over 40% of the galaxy for 2,000 years, maintaining order through careful diplomacy backed by overwhelming military force. Now, for the first time in their recorded history, they faced a potential threat to their dominance. Chancellor Veldar of the Crystalline Ascendancy activated the holographic display at the center of the council chamber, showing tactical recordings from the Battle of Earth. Even 6 months later, their best scientists still couldn't explain how human technology worked. "The evidence is undeniable," Veldar announced to the assembled council members. The humans possess weapons and defensive systems that operate on principles our science cannot comprehend. In less than 4 hours, they completely destroyed a Caltharian fleet that should have been capable of conquering their entire star system. Council member Zorthak, a massive insectoid being representing the Swarm Collective, clicked his mandibles nervously. My people's analysis indicates the humans are using technology that manipulates matter at the quantum level. They can phase their ships in and out of normal spacetime at will. Our conventional weapons are useless against such capabilities. Worse than useless, corrected Representative Kalari of the Aquatic Federation. Our intelligence reports indicate that their ships actually convert incoming weapon fire into additional power for their own systems. Attacking them makes them stronger. Chancellor Veldar nodded grimly. Which brings us to the purpose of this emergency session. In the 6 months since the Battle of Earth, 17 different species have successfully revolted against their Caltharian overlords. The humans appear to be providing them with advanced weapons and technological support. The holographic display shifted to show star maps highlighting the territories that were no longer under Caltharian control. World after world had declared independence, and, in every case, the local occupation forces had been overwhelmed by resistance movements equipped with technology that shouldn't exist. The pattern is clear, continued Veldar. The humans aren't content to simply defend their own territory. They're actively working to dismantle the Caltharian Empire and liberate every species that was under their control. The question before this council is whether humanity represents a threat to our own territories. Admiral Jex Nor of the military command spoke up from his position at the council table. Our analysts believe the human expansion is directed specifically against oppressive regimes. Our intelligence indicates they're making distinctions between species based on their treatment of other sentient beings. What do you mean? Asked Councilmember Darwin of the Silicon Confederacy. The humans appear to be evaluating galactic civilizations based on their policies toward other species, Jex Nor explained. The Caltharians practice slavery and genocide. The humans are dismantling their empire piece by piece. However, they've made no moves against species that govern their territories through democratic principles or consensual alliances. Chancellor Veldar processed this information with growing unease. The hegemony maintained control over their territories through a complex system of military occupation and economic dependency. While they didn't practice outright slavery like the Caltharians, their subject species had little real autonomy. Are you suggesting the humans might consider our governance methods problematic? Veldar asked carefully. Admiral Jex Nor consulted his data tablet before responding. Our xenosociology experts believe the humans operate under a philosophical framework that prioritizes individual freedom and self-determination. From their perspective, any species that denies these rights to other sentient beings would be considered a legitimate target for liberation. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the humans were indeed planning to liberate every species in the galaxy that didn't meet their standards for freedom and autonomy, then virtually every major power was at risk. Representative Kalari raised a crucial question. Do we even have the military capability to resist them if they decide we're a threat? Admiral Jex Nor's response was sobering. Based on our analysis of their technology, no. Our conventional fleets would be as helpless against human weapons as the Caltharians were. They possess capabilities that our science says should be impossible. Then, what do you recommend? Asked Chancellor Veldar. Negotiation, replied Jex Nor without hesitation. If we can't defeat them militarily, we need to find a diplomatic solution. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation that satisfies their requirements while preserving our essential interests. The suggestion sparked intense debate among the council members. For 2,000 years, the hegemony had been the dominant power in their region of space. The idea of negotiating with a species that had existed on the galactic stage for less than a year was almost incomprehensible. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Chun was dealing with her own set of challenges. The success of humanity's liberation campaign had brought them into contact with dozens of different species, each with their own cultures, needs, and expectations. Managing the political complexities of galactic civilization was proving to be almost as difficult as developing the technology to fight it. Status report on the liberation efforts, Chen requested as she entered the expanded command center that now coordinated humanity's operations across multiple star systems. Dr. Vasquez looked up from a holographic display showing the current political map of the galaxy. 17 former Caltharian worlds have declared independence with our support. The resistance movements we've been arming have proven remarkably effective once they gained access to quantum weapons technology. Any complications? Chen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Several, Dr. Vasquez admitted. The Zelanti on Kepler 442b are demanding that we help them launch preemptive strikes against Caltharian civilian populations. The Draconi want us to provide them with enough firepower to conquer their neighboring star systems. And the Crystalline Collective has requested our assistance in forcibly converting other silicon-based species to their particular form of consciousness. Chun rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. Any of them willing to accept our conditions for continued support? About half, replied General Martinez from his position at the military coordination station. The species that are genuinely interested in freedom and self-determination are happy to work within our framework. But there are definitely some liberation movements that want to use our technology to become the new oppressors. This was the problem Chun had anticipated from the beginning. Providing advanced technology to oppressed species was necessary to break the Caltharian Empire's control, but some of those species had no interest in building free societies. They simply wanted to reverse the power structure with themselves on top. What's our position on the hegemony? Chen asked, changing the subject to what she considered a more immediate concern. They've been sending diplomatic communications through intermediaries, reported Colonel Torres from intelligence. Nothing direct yet, but they're clearly trying to gauge our intentions toward their territories. Chen nodded thoughtfully. The hegemony was a much more complex challenge than the Caltharian Empire had been. While they maintained control over their subject species, they did so through economic and political pressure rather than outright slavery. Their system was oppressive, but it wasn't genocidal. Any indication of what their civilian populations think about their government? Chen asked. Mixed, Torres replied. Our intelligence suggests that some species within hegemony space are content with the current arrangement, while others would prefer more autonomy. It's not a clear-cut case of oppression like the Caltharian territories were. This was exactly the kind of situation Chun had hoped to avoid. The Caltharians had been easy enemies. Their empire was built on slavery and genocide, making them clear targets for liberation. The hegemony operated in shades of gray that made moral judgments much more difficult. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez called from her station. We're receiving a priority transmission from the hegemony. They're requesting formal diplomatic contact. Chun considered the implications. Direct communication with the hegemony would represent humanity's first formal diplomatic relationship with a major galactic power. How they handled this contact would set precedents for future interactions with other civilizations. Put them through, she decided. The holographic display activated, showing Chancellor Veldar standing in what appeared to be an ornate government chamber. Despite his alien appearance, crystalline skin, and multiple sets of eyes, his body language clearly conveyed nervous formality. Admiral Chun, Veldar began, his voice transmitted through universal translator systems. I am Chancellor Veldar of the Hegemony High Council. We request the opportunity to establish formal diplomatic relations between our civilizations. Chen studied the alien leader carefully before responding. Chancellor, I'm willing to discuss diplomatic relations. What exactly are you proposing? A non-aggression pact, Veldar replied quickly. Our analysis indicates that your recent actions have been directed against oppressive regimes. The hegemony seeks peaceful coexistence with all sentient species. We believe our civilizations can find common ground. The hegemony maintains control over how many species? Chen asked pointedly. Veldar's hesitation told her everything she needed to know. 47 species currently exist within hegemony space under our guidance and protection. Under your guidance, Chen repeated. Do those species have the right to self-determination? Can they choose to leave the hegemony if they wish? The Chancellor's discomfort was visible even across species lines. The relationship between the hegemony and our member species is complex. We provide security, economic stability, and technological advancement in exchange for cooperation in matters of galactic importance. Chen exchanged glances with her staff. The careful diplomatic language couldn't hide the basic reality. The hegemony was another empire that maintained control through force, even if they used more subtle methods than the Caltharians. Chancellor, Chen said finally, humanity's position is simple. Every sentient species has the right to determine its own government and future. If the species within hegemony space are truly there voluntarily, then we have no quarrel with your civilization. And if some of them express a desire for independence? Veldar asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then, they have the right to independence, Chen replied without hesitation. If the hegemony attempts to prevent any species from exercising that right through force or coercion, we'll view that as an act of oppression requiring our intervention. The transmission ended with both sides understanding exactly where they stood. The hegemony now faced the same choice the Caltharians had been given: adapt to a new reality where oppression was no longer tolerated, or face the consequences of humanity's advanced technology. On Earth, Chen turned to her staff with a heavy expression. Begin Phase 4. Start making contact with the individual species within hegemony space. Let them know they have options now. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her station with concern. Admiral, are we sure we want to destabilize another major galactic power so soon? We're still dealing with the aftermath of the Caltharian collapse. Chen studied the galactic map, showing the territories controlled by various empires and the growing number of free worlds. Doctor, we didn't start this fight. But, now that we're in it, we're going to finish it. Every species in this galaxy deserves the right to determine its own future. If that means dismantling every empire that stands in the way of freedom, then that's exactly what we're going to do. The room fell silent as the implications of humanity's new galactic policy sank in. They weren't just defending Earth anymore. They had appointed themselves the guardians of freedom for every sentient species in the galaxy. It was an ambitious goal that would require them to challenge powers that had existed for thousands of years. But, as the tactical displays showed the growing strength of humanity's hidden fleets and the spreading network of liberated worlds, it was becoming clear that humanity had both the technology and the determination to make their vision a reality. The Battle of Earth had been just the beginning. The real war for galactic freedom was about to start. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before humanity emerged from their small corner of space. The great star maps that had remained unchanged for millennia were being redrawn almost daily as species after species declared independence from the empires that had controlled them for centuries. Admiral Chen stood before a massive holographic display in the new Galactic Coordination Center on Luna, watching real-time updates from across the galaxy. Green indicators showed the 127 worlds that had achieved independence with human support. Yellow markers indicated species that were in active negotiation for autonomy. Red warnings highlighted areas where major powers were still resisting the wave of liberation sweeping across civilized space. Status report, she requested from her expanded command staff. Colonel Torres looked up from her intelligence station with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The good news is that the liberation campaigns are succeeding beyond our most optimistic projections. We've provided technological and logistical support to independence movements on over 200 worlds. Most of the former Caltharian territories are now free and self-governing. And the concerning news? Chen prompted. 3 major galactic powers have formed a military alliance specifically to counter human expansion, Torres continued. The Dominion Fleet Admiralty, the Corporate Syndicate, and the Hive Mind Collective have designated humanity as an existential threat to galactic stability. Dr. Vasquez activated a new section of the display, showing the territories controlled by these 3 powers. Combined, they represented nearly half of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Their combined military strength is approximately 50 times larger than what the Caltharians had. If they coordinate their attack properly, we could be facing simultaneous assaults across dozens of different star systems. Chen studied the intelligence data with the calm professionalism that had carried her through the previous year of constant crisis management. Do we have any indication of their timeline for joint action? Our quantum intelligence network suggests they're planning a coordinated strike within the next 60 days, Torres replied. They've been moving fleets into position while publicly calling for diplomatic solutions to the human expansion problem. General Martinez joined the briefing with additional tactical data. Admiral, our strategic analysis indicates they're planning to hit Earth directly while simultaneously attacking our support bases throughout the liberated territories. They want to cut off the head while destroying our infrastructure. This was the scenario Chun had been preparing for since the day they first revealed humanity's true capabilities. The initial victories had been achieved through surprise and technological superiority, but now they faced enemies who understood they were fighting for their existence and had time to prepare. What's the status of our fleet expansion? Chun asked. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was an expression of genuine optimism. The Vorthack manufacturing systems we've implemented have exceeded all performance projections. We currently have over 10,000 ships of various classes, with production rates that can replace our entire fleet every 36 days. More importantly, added Martinez, we've been able to distribute advanced defensive systems to every liberated world. Even if they manage to break through our primary fleet, they'll find that conquering free worlds isn't as easy as it used to be. Chun nodded with satisfaction. This was the key advantage humanity had developed over the past year. They weren't fighting a traditional war where victory meant defeating enemy fleets and occupying territory. They were fighting an ideological war where victory meant proving that freedom was stronger than oppression, and that proof was built into every world they liberated. Admiral, called out Communications Officer Park, we're receiving a joint transmission from the Allied powers. They're requesting immediate negotiations to resolve the destabilization crisis. Put them through, Chun ordered, though she suspected she knew exactly what kind of negotiations they had in mind. The holographic display activated, showing 3 very different alien beings standing in what appeared to be a joint command center. Admiral Vekshala of the Dominion Fleet Admiralty, a tall humanoid being with scales and multiple arms. Director Kolmesh of the Corporate Syndicate, whose cybernetic implants had replaced most of his original biology. And the Collective Voice, a living swarm of insectoid creatures that spoke with one unified consciousness. Admiral Chun, began Vekshala, his tone formal and threatening. We represent the Alliance for Galactic Stability. Your species' actions over the past year have created a crisis that threatens the fundamental order of civilized space. Chun studied the 3 beings with professional interest. Each represented a different form of galactic tyranny, military dictatorship, corporate feudalism, and collective consciousness that eliminated individual identity. And what exactly would you like to discuss? Director Kolmesh activated a holographic display showing territorial boundaries. We propose a division of the galaxy into spheres of influence. Humanity may maintain control over the Sol system and any worlds that voluntarily join your federation. In exchange, you will cease all interference in territories controlled by the established galactic powers. The Collective Voice spoke with the unified harmony of a billion minds. This proposal represents the only path to avoiding galactic war on a scale not seen in 10,000 years. Your refusal will force us to take military action to preserve the stability that has maintained peace for millennia. Chun almost smiled at the transparent threat disguised as diplomacy. Let me make sure I understand your proposal. You want humanity to agree that slavery is acceptable as long as we don't interfere with your practice of it. The relationship between advanced civilizations and their subjects is more complex than your simplistic terminology suggests, Vekshala responded stiffly. We provide security, technology, and guidance to species that lack the capacity for self-governance. Interesting, Chun replied. And if these species disagree with your assessment of their capabilities? If they express a desire to govern themselves? Director Kolmesh's cybernetic eyes flickered with cold calculation. Species that lack the wisdom to appreciate the benefits of stable governance must be protected from their own destructive impulses. This is a fundamental principle of galactic civilization. Chun exchanged glances with her staff, seeing her own disgust reflected in their expressions. These were the same justifications that every oppressive regime in galactic history had used to rationalize their control over other beings. Gentlemen, Shin said formally, humanity's position hasn't changed since we first entered galactic affairs. Every sentient species has the right to self-determination. Any attempt to deny that right through force or coercion will be met with our intervention. The collective voice buzzed with harmonic displeasure. You speak of rights as if they were natural laws rather than constructs of civilization. Individual consciousness is chaos. Order requires unity of purpose achieved through collective will. Your collective will, Shin pointed out, imposed on species that had no choice in the matter. Choice is an illusion that leads to conflict, the collective responded. We have eliminated war, poverty, and suffering from our territories by eliminating the individual desires that create these problems. Shin had heard enough. This conversation is over. If you want to test humanity's resolve, you're welcome to try. But understand that we've spent the past year preparing for exactly this moment. The transmission ended with the three allied leaders understanding that diplomacy had failed. Within hours, intelligence reports began flowing and showing massive fleet movements throughout their territories. The largest military buildup in galactic history was beginning, aimed directly at humanity and every world they had liberated. On Earth, the emergency session of the Human Defense Council brought together representatives from every liberated world, along with humanity's military and scientific leadership. The room that had once coordinated the defense of a single planet now served as the nerve center for a galactic alliance of free worlds. The intelligence is clear, Shin announced to the assembled delegates. The Alliance for Galactic Stability is planning a simultaneous assault on 53 different star systems. They intend to crush our liberation movement and restore the old order of oppression. Commander Thal of the Zelanti Independence Movement stood to address the council. Admiral Chun, my people have prepared our defenses using the technology you've shared with us. But we're concerned about coordinating our response across so many different systems. That won't be a problem, Dr. Vasquez assured him. The quantum communication network we've established operates instantaneously across galactic distances. Every liberated world will have real-time coordination with our main fleet. Representative Kaelera of the Draconi Free Republic raised another concern. What happens if they break through our defenses? My people remember what occupation was like under the Caltharians. We won't survive another era of enslavement. Chun stood before the assembled delegates, her presence commanding attention from beings of dozens of different species. Ladies, gentlemen, and entities of all forms, the Allies believe they're fighting a war to preserve the old order. They think they can intimidate us into accepting limits on freedom because that's how conflicts have always been resolved in the past. She activated the tactical display, showing the true scope of humanity's preparations over the past year. Hidden fleets throughout the galaxy, defensive networks that spanned entire star systems, manufacturing facilities that could produce new ships faster than enemies could destroy them. What they don't understand is that this isn't a traditional war, Shin continued. We're not fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. We're fighting for a principle that cannot be compromised or negotiated away. We're fighting for the idea that every sentient being has the right to determine their own destiny. The display shifted to show intelligence reports from throughout Alliance territory. Even within their own controlled systems, resistance movements were organizing. Species that had been oppressed for centuries were preparing to rise up the moment the Alliance fleets departed to attack human targets. The Allies made the same mistake the Caltharians made, Shin explained. They assumed that superior numbers and conventional military thinking would be enough to defeat us. They don't understand that we've been building more than just ships and weapons. We've been building an idea, and ideas are much harder to destroy than fleets. Dr. Vasquez activated the final section of the display, showing technological developments that pushed even further beyond conventional physics. Weapons that could strike targets across dimensional barriers. Ships that could exist in multiple universes simultaneously. Defensive systems that could protect entire star systems by manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. The technology we're using today is just the beginning, Dr. Vasquez announced. The Vorthack archives contain theoretical frameworks for capabilities that we're only now learning to implement. By the time this war is over, our enemies will discover that they're not just fighting humanity. They're fighting the combined scientific knowledge of every species that ever resisted galactic tyranny. The council session concluded with unanimous agreement. The free worlds would stand together against any attempt to restore the old order of oppression. Representatives from 127 different species committed their civilizations to the defense of galactic freedom. As the delegates departed to prepare their homeworlds for the coming battle, Admiral Chun remained in the command center with her closest advisors. The holographic display showed fleet movements throughout the galaxy as both sides prepared for a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said quietly, "are you certain we're ready for this? They're bringing everything they have. If we lose this battle, every world we've liberated will be enslaved again." Chin studied the tactical projections one more time, running through scenarios and contingencies in her mind. The alliance arrayed against them was massive and well-coordinated. Their fleets included technology accumulated over thousands of years of galactic dominance. The odds, by any conventional analysis, were overwhelming. "Doctor," Chin replied with quiet confidence, "when we first detected the Caltharian fleet approaching Earth, the odds seemed impossible too. But we won that battle because we refused to accept that freedom was negotiable. The principles haven't changed, and neither has our determination." She activated a new section of the display, showing the network of liberated worlds and the growing web of free civilizations that had formed in the past year. Each world was more than just a strategic asset. It was proof that alternatives to oppression could work, that freedom was not just an idealistic dream, but a practical reality. The Allies believe they're fighting to preserve galactic stability. Chin continued. What they're actually fighting is the future. And the future has a tendency to be unstoppable once it gets started. Throughout the galaxy, final preparations were being made for the largest military confrontation in recorded history. Alliance fleets numbering in the hundreds of thousands of ships were moving into attack positions. Ancient weapons systems that hadn't been activated in millennia were being brought online. Entire civilizations were preparing for a war that would decide whether freedom or oppression would define the next era of galactic history. But in the hidden facilities throughout human space, and in the secret bases on every liberated world, something unprecedented was taking shape. Not just a military response, but a demonstration of what free civilizations could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. The Allies believed the Battle of Earth had been humanity's greatest victory. They were about to learn that it had been nothing more than a warm-up exercise. The real test of human resolve and ingenuity was about to begin, and its outcome would determine whether the galaxy would finally be free or would remain enslaved for another 1,000 years. As Admiral Chun watched the final preparations unfold across dozens of star systems, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The enemy was coming with everything they had, confident in their superior numbers and traditional advantages. They had no idea what they were about to face, and by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late to change the outcome. The age of galactic freedom was about to begin in earnest, and nothing in the universe was going to stop it.